Yes, welcome everybody. So the presentation today is called The Creative Way to Beat Burnout, a Reset for Women in STEM. So that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Subtitle is How to Complete the Stress Cycle, Reset Your Energy, and Find Space to Breathe. And I'm Alexandra Reid. And this presentation, I will say, is also inspired by the book Burnout by the sisters Amelia and Emily Nagoski. And I highly recommend reading that book. It's a really nice read and gives some great insights. So, this session is about something we don't talk enough about in STEM, the toll that stress takes, not just intellectually, but also physically and emotionally. And I want to go beyond self-care as a buzzword and get really into the real mechanisms behind burnout. And the reason that I've decided to pair science with creativity today is simple, is we don't just need information, we need tools that can help reconnect us with our bodies, with meaning, and with each other. So you're in the right place if you feel guilty for resting, but you still feel you can't catch up. You love your STEM career, but the burnout is real. You wake up tired, no matter how early you go to bed. You've tried self-care practices, but nothing seems to be really happening. And that's because burnout isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. It looks like you're hitting all your deadlines, but inside you're feeling numb. It looks like having a job you once loved, but you're waking up now every day with a sense of dread. And it's often in visible environments like STEM where pushing through is the norm and slowing down feels a bit like failure. One of the most powerful insights I want to share from the book Burnout is that you can't think of burnout as being a personal flaw. It's actually a physiological and a systemic outcome, especially for high achieving women who have been trained to both overgive and overfunction. So I want you to know it's fine to take a break here. It's okay to take a deep breath. You're allowed to feel tired, skeptical, overwhelmed, and this is a safe space. So, what you're going to learn today is why burnout isn't just stress. It's actually what happens when stress gets stuck. We're going to talk about the hidden trap that keeps high achieving women in STEM overwhelmed. I'm going to give you three simple strategies to help reset your energy and protect your focus, and talk a bit about ongoing support afterwards through a small group coaching program that I've designed for this creative reset. So, yeah, think of today as a soft reset. You're going to leave with some tools that will work with your nervous system, not against it. And you're going to start understanding why certain strategies like pausing, drawing, or even just simple laughter with friends can do more for your health than just pushing through one more task. So, this is based on the neuroscience of completing the stress cycle. And this is a concept from the book Burnout that explains why, simply removing the stressors doesn't actually make the stress go away. You have to physically complete the stress response. Otherwise, it stays in your body. So, this is about getting some relief, but it's also about learning how to respond, not just simply react. And, if this is something that speaks to you, definitely I'll be talking more about that group coaching program towards the end. And that's designed to support your reset with creative tools and some structured reflection. So here's a quick little icebreaker. Imagine it's 6 months from now and burnout is no longer running the show. What's going to feel different in your day? What's one small thing that's shifted for you in that day? And I don't want you to treat this as simply a visualization exercise for productivity. This is meant to be more of a personal check-in. So if burnout wasn't in the driver's seat anymore, what would that free up in your life? Would you have more patience? Would you have more sleep? More time for some enjoyment or movement? Sometimes we need to think that we need to overhaul everything to feel better. But I just want to remind you that, wellness isn't a final destination. It's about how we move through daily stress with more awareness and support. So this is just a little bit of a high level agenda and some expectations to set. So we're going to try to unpack the science of burnout and why simply just resting isn't feeling like it's working. We're going to look at the hidden pressure of what's keeping women in STEM stuck. Look at these three simple tools to help you reset, not just push through. And we're actually going to do a creative activity, what I call a live burnout reset, and discover how to keep going afterwards. So this session follows the arc of awareness to insight to action. We're going to explore why traditional self-care doesn't work when you're stuck in the stress cycle. We'll look at the hidden burnout traps, especially for women in STEM, where the game is often rigged. It's often asking more than is humanly sustainable for one person. You'll also get to try one creative reset tool during the session. It's just going to take a few minutes, pen and paper, no real art skills required. And the goal of this activity is to help your body and brain feel a little more regulated, a little less on, and a little more present. And yeah, as I mentioned, after today, there's a chance to continue. But again, no pressure. This is just about giving options, not obligations. All right, what is burnout? So you can think of burnout equaling chronic stress plus an unfinished stress cycle. There's three core components. There's the emotional exhaustion, where you feel drained even after resting. There's depersonalization, and this is the feelings of numbness or feeling cynical about your work. And also reduced accomplishment, like nothing you're doing really counts anymore. So burnout isn't just about being tired. It's when your body is stuck in the stress mode, even after the stressor is gone. You can remove the deadline, you can finish the project, you can take the vacation, and you still may feel a bit hollow or wired or exhausted. And that's because your stress response hasn't been completed. So the real danger isn't the stress itself, it's actually the chronic unprocessed stress that stays in your body day after day. So if you don't learn how to release it, it just accumulates. And that's why burnout shows up physically. It could be brain fog, it could be recurring illnesses, sleep disruption, as I mentioned, emotional numbness. So if you feel like something's wrong with you for being this tired, this disconnected, this fed up, it's not a personal flaw. It's actually the physiology. It's what's being built up in your body. So burnout in STEM, why it hits women harder, especially in these areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. There's this pressure to always perform at 110%. The feeling like you need to prove yourself over and over again. Overwork is being praised, recovery is ignored, swept under the rug, and there's no built-in system to help you reset. You know, these environments, definitely reward overwork, but for women especially, there's another layer. You're not just doing the job, you're actually proving that you deserve to be in the room. This means working harder to be taken seriously, to be visible, not to be mistaken for an assistant. And, the irony is the more competent you are, the more responsibilities you're given without being given more support to do those responsibilities. So, burnout in this context isn't just exhaustion, it's actually more like a moral injury. You're being asked to do more than should be sustainable. You're doing your best inside a system that isn't built to support your well being. The book Burnout calls this a bit of a rigged game, and framing that helps shift the blame away from you, taking it personally, and shift that towards the system that's demanding too much from you and giving back too little. So, the stress cycle, why you still feel exhausted. So, stress is a biological process. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. The problem is, most of us actually never complete this full cycle. Animals naturally release stress. Humans tend to suppress it. I often see this walking my dog in the morning. He'll meet a strange dog. He'll be all upset and tense. And as soon as he walks past that dog, he just shakes himself all over and he's fine. He just keeps walking. So here's a key takeaway. Stress and stressors are not the same. The stressor is the deadline, the toxic boss, the expectations. Stress is what happens in your body in response to it. The issue is removing the stressor doesn't clear the stress. It's like your body was gearing up to run from a tiger and the tiger's gone, but your muscles are still tense, your heart's still racing, your cortisol levels are still high. So unless you actually complete the stress response with, it could be movement, it could be breath, it could be connection, social connection, it's going to stay stuck in your system and it's going to accumulate. And it doesn't just make you tired, it will actually physically make you ill over time. So here are some simple ways to complete the stress cycle. First, move your body, go for a walk, dance in your kitchen, stretch, shake it out like the dog. Something that actually signals to your body that the stress is past. You can do deep breathing where you take a longer exhale. So There's what they call box breathing, where you bring it, breathe in for 4 counts, you hold for 4 counts, and you release for 8 counts. And this helps with heart rate variability and the recovery. And then connection, social connection. We're social beings. If, having a simple laugh with a friend, a longer hug, conversation outside of work, all of these things help to complete the cycle to get us unstuck from the stress. But definitely the best studied, most effective method is movement. It doesn't have to be a gym workout. It could be walking around the block, stretching in your chair, as mentioned, dancing in your kitchen. Other effective ways are the deep breathing, the long exhales, the positive social connection. But also, I want to stress, importantly, creative expression also counts as one of these methods. Drawing, journaling, singing, even mindful doodling. These are all methods that signal to your nervous system that you're safe now. The danger's past. The body can let go of the stress. And you don't need to do all of these. One strategy practiced regularly is enough to start shifting the baseline. So, which method feels most doable to you? And this isn't a trick question. There's no best method. There's only what feels possible for you right now. We've been conditioned to believe that if we can't overhaul everything, we shouldn't bother. But I want to remind you that small actions done consistently, can actually change our biology over time. It's that neuroplasticity, it's the rewiring. So I want you to pick a method that fits your life today, not your ideal life, not what you're aspiring to. And maybe that's just taking a slow breath before your next meeting. Maybe it's texting a friend. Maybe it's just getting up and stretching from your chair for a minute or two. Notice how choosing a method helps shift your mindset from feeling, stuck to feeling more supported, more at ease. And this is one of the reasons that burnout hits us so hard. We've been taught to overwork, overgive, and always be on. Rest feels a bit like failure, even though, when we know we need it. And the problem isn't just stress, it's the pressure to be everything for everyone. And this is where I want to start to challenge the story that many of us carry that, if we're burned out, we must be doing something wrong. But I want you to reframe this. Women, especially in professional or caregiving roles, are often told to overfunction. We're taught to perform, to give, to produce, and to keep smiling through it all. We internalize the idea that our worth comes from being endlessly available to others. So even if we know we're exhausted, the guilt stops us from resting. And, this isn't about individual choices. It is a bit about a cultural script. And that script is broken. We don't have to follow the script. Burnout becomes almost inevitable when we live in a system that expects more from us than it's willing to give back to support us. So again, burnout is not a personal failure, but it's a sign that you're carrying more than one human's worth of responsibility. The book Burnout calls this the human giver syndrome, the idea that women are meant to be givers of the energy, of calm, of care, of support, but not necessarily the receivers. And when you're socialized to be a giver, rest feels selfish. Saying no feels like letting people down. Even being seen as tired can feel like you're not actually doing enough. And this mindset shows up everywhere, from over volunteering at work to skipping lunch to answer emails. And the end result is that you start learning to disconnect from your own personal needs. And, that's not just simply exhausting, it's actually dehumanizing because you're not a machine, you're a whole person. And you can't treat your needs as a burden. Rest isn't meant to be a reward for being productive. It's a biological requirement, and it's one that you shouldn't have to feel like you earn. And this is why it feels wrong to rest, even when you need it. We're always expected to be emotionally available, putting others first, even when we're exhausted, and staying productive at all costs. Which leads to the perfectionism loop. Perfectionism often feels like ambition, but it's really about safety. If I'm perfect, I won't be criticized. If I don't make mistakes, I'll finally feel like I'm enough. But I want to remind you, perfectionism doesn't prevent burnout. It actually accelerates it because, yeah, you can never win. There's always something else you should be doing better. And in STEM, that pressure is amplified by high stakes environments and constant evaluation. We often push ourselves to the edge thinking it'll prove our value, but that usually just ends up depleting us more. So, if you've ever stayed late just to look committed or, rewritten thing, 5, 6 times just so you can avoid judgment. You're not alone. That's not weakness. That's the perfectionism loop. And, I want us to think about a way out of that because otherwise it does keep you stuck. You overwork, you burn out, you feel guilty for slowing down, so you push harder. And STEM culture, tends to reward the hustle culture, but that doesn't make you better at your job either. So let's talk about some micro boundaries. These are 3 micro boundaries that will help you protect your energy. Big boundaries can feel intimidating, and that's why these micro boundaries are so powerful because they help to interrupt burnout before it escalates. We have the 5-minute no, which is basically where it gives you the space to pause to check in before committing. Pause before automatically saying yes. We have the me first rule, which is, start your day with one small thing just for you. It reclaims the start of your day before your energy gets hijacked. And then we have the permission slip. You could write this down in your notes app, piece of paper, post-it note. Write down what you're allowed to do today. Again, even if it's just resting. This helps override that guilt voice in your head that says you should be doing more. What's important here is that these aren't about being defiant. They're about being intentional with your choices. When you protect your energy in small ways, we signal to our nervous system, I'm safe. I'm not on fire. I can rest. And you don't have to say no to everything, but if you pause first, you get to choose what you want to spend your energy on. And stories help us see what's possible. Sarah didn't quit her job or change her whole life. She started with one shift. She paused before she said yes. And that gave her enough space to check. Do I have the capacity to do this? Is it aligned with what matters to me? The result isn't just fewer commitments, it's more energy, more clarity, and having more confidence in making those choices. And that leads to burnout recovery. It's that chance to actually check in with yourself and see where you want to put your energy. And this doesn't require like a grand gesture. It often begins with just a single choice that feels different from the old pattern. You know, most people don't need more willpower. They just need more permission to make the choices they want to make. Okay, so we are going to do a little quick activity, and I call this the small wins pathway. So just grab a pen and paper. We're going to do a quick visual reflection, and it's not about artistic skill. It's just about visually seeing progress that you've already made. So this is where the science meets the practice. You don't need artistic skills, I said. You don't even need to like drawing. Just have a pen and paper. And the point is to shift your attention from thinking to sensing. So we're shifting from a productivity mode into a presence mode. This is a way to help complete the stress cycle using visual expression. So your body can begin to process what your brain has been carrying. And again, there's no way, no right way to do this. You can't get it wrong. Okay, so step 1, we're going to draw your path. So the idea is to start by drawing a curvy or zigzag line across the page. And this line represents the past few weeks of your life, your personal path through stress, through effort, and start noticing the quiet wins. And it's not about drawing something beautiful. It's just a way to give some visual, some tangible form to your experiences that have been living in your head. You're literally mapping out the terrain you've been walking. And I don't want you to overthink it. It's just a container for the next step. So idea, just let your pen move. This is your burnout to reset line. So step 2, you're going to add your wins. So along that path, write down 3 to 5 small wins, moments where maybe you took a real break, you said no to something, you chose rest over guilt, you felt even slightly better by making a different choice. And this is where I want you to add a little bit of symbols. You could add a star where you felt proud of something, or a heart where you decided to do something that made you feel better. A little flower for wellness. Where do you take a wellness break? So start looking at those choices. Where did you make a choice for your own well-being, even if it was tiny? Maybe it was a day you closed your laptop on time, a moment where you paused and said no, a breath that you took before reacting. Those are all small, quiet wins, and your nervous system notices them. In the book Burnout, it talks about the monitor, which is a part of your brain that tracks progress. It's what fuels hope, positivity. So even one small step towards relief can help, reset that system. So I want you to write down your wins and mark them with a simple symbol, something personal to you. And the idea is that this is showing that you're not just surviving, you are moving forward on your path. And this is how burnout recovery begins. It begins with recognition of those moments you chose for yourself. So take a moment to reflect. What does your path reveal? Take a breath, pause, look at your drawing. Where have you created space for yourself? What's helped you move forward along this path, even just a little? What does it show you? Maybe you've done more than you realize. Maybe there's some patterns here or gaps or signs of, progress. Again, I want to remind you that we don't need to overhaul our entire lives. We just need a bit of awareness and some recovery rituals that, meet us where we are. This drawing becomes one of those rituals. It is something small, but it's also something private and something real. It's something that is just for you to help you reflect. If you do want to share a word or a symbol that stood out for you, put it into the chat. Somebody else might need to see that as well. So what comes next? Now you have a sense of what burnout is. What would real relief look like? If you had weekly support, more creative tools, and time, to take and to reflect without overhauling your whole life. And that's what I've designed the Creative Reset program for. And it's meant to be a small group coaching program for women in STEM who want to reset their energy, reconnect with their creativity, and move forward with less stress. So it's about moving from survival mode into more of a sustainable reset. You'll build a creative toolkit for real stress relief. It's part of a small supportive group of women in STEM who also get it. So you don't have to carry burnout alone or wait for the time, to magically appear to deal with it. It's about making space for yourself bit by bit with some creative tools that'll actually fit into your lifestyle. Each of these sessions help you reconnect with what matters and helps you feel a bit more grounded. And peer support means, you're no longer the only one trying to hold it all together. You've got others to share your stories with. So it creates some structure and some breathing room. And instead of trying to fix burnout with solo efforts, you've tried the self-care, you're going to work along other women who understand the pressure of STEM careers. Each week you get live coaching, you get to try some reflective exercises and use creative activities to help shift stress physically and emotionally. I don't want to underestimate the power of being seen and heard by others in similar shoes. It's a reset all on its own as soon as you've been in one of those group environments. So the results aren't just personal, they'll ripple into your work. It'll help build your clarity and your confidence. And, you know, these weekly sessions give you that space to reflect, to ask questions, to share the stories, to build that connection, and a lot of this is science backed. It shows that the neuroscience is there that supports this creativity. Each session is going to focus on a different aspect of burnout recovery, like boundaries, like energy drains, or perfectionism. We'll start with coaching tools and short creative exercises to process what comes up and then reflect as a group. The small group size, I'm looking to basically have about 10 women per cohort, and that creates a sense of, trust and safety in a small group. It's a container where we establish the boundaries of what we're willing to share with each other. Space to share, be witnessed, and you get to learn from the insights of others. Definitely some of the most powerful breakthroughs comes from hearing someone else say what you've been feeling, but you might not have had the words for. And why does this program work? As I said, it's backed by science. It's not just a feel-good workshop. It is grounded in how the nervous system actually works. The creative coaching helps regulate the stress responses. It helps integrate emotions and helps you rewire how you respond to overwhelm. You gain some real insights into your patterns, but you'll also practice doing things a bit differently with support. So the group structure adds a layer of consistency and motivation that's, it's hard to create that on your own. you'll learn to reset in ways that are both, gentle and effective. It's going to engage both your brain and your body through the coaching and the creative exercises. It is based on neuroscience, psychology, and nervous system regulation. And I've designed it for busy women. Busy women, real life, they are short 5-minute exercises that fit the schedule. If you're interested, it's at my website, mindartwellness.com. I'm also offering a 30-minute clarity call for women that want to discuss how the program might work for them. As I mentioned, the space is limited, but I've made that intentional. So we have these small, intimate conversations. I'm running a pilot right now with 12 women, and already we're only into week 2, and some of the insights and the breakthroughs, I have to say that it's been quite thrilling for me as a coach to see these women have these aha moments. They come in feeling super stressed and, oh God, here's my activity. I have another thing to do. But after I've checked in with them, it's amazing the difference. I didn't think it'd be as dramatic as it is. And I have to say, it's quite impressive, these aha moments they're having. But yes, definitely book a clarity call with me. You get a taste of my coaching style. We talk about what kind of support would serve you best. And yeah, you don't need to have it all figured out, just a willingness to try something different. And, these are some of the comments that are being said. So the women who are doing this work say the biggest shift isn't just how they felt, but how they thought about themselves. They apologized for stop needing rest. They spoke up more at work. They reconnected what, lit up their spirits, what made them feel alive again. And, they didn't have to do it alone. They worked with me as a coach. They got to talk to each other as peer to peer. The peer coaching really does add depth. When somebody reflects your growth back to you, it lands differently. You feel seen, you feel heard. This program gives you both the inner reset and the outer support to sustain it. And I just want to stress that the clarity call isn't just an intake call. It is a chance to feel what the coaching work is like. We'll look at how burnout shows up for you and, try a simple drawing or journaling tool during the call. And even sometimes just that short experience sparks a shift, a mindset shift. It's quite powerful, these little activities. You also get to ask questions about the group format, the weekly structure, and whether it's a fit for your current needs. So you can think of it as a preview without a commitment. And yeah, if you're feeling drawn to it, trust that instinct. It's worth exploring. So you can either, apply through my website or just send me an email directly at coach@lexireidstudio.com. But of course, everyone says, but I don't have time. This is the most common thing I hear. And honestly, I get it. When you're burned out, the thought of adding something else just feels exhausting. But I think you know this. This is the truth. Burnout won't resolve it by itself. It won't go away when your schedule clears or the project wraps up or you take that one lone weekend off, because the stress is still in your body. You're still carrying it with you. I've built this program for your burned out self, not your ideal self. You don't have to carve out hours, just 10 minutes quietly a day, and that would be enough. If you're waiting for the perfect time to start feeling better, this is it. These small shifts do make a real difference. Instead of doom scrolling for half an hour on your phone, feeling worse by the compare and despair, take a few minutes for yourself to just reflect. The exercise we did today, that was less than 5 minutes. And yet you took a chance to sort of think about what matters to you. Where were those quiet wins? These are the types of resets you practice each week, and they build upon each other as we move through the program. The small insights, the creative tools, all of this support adds up to real change. The drawing you made today, that's proof that the reset doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Small steps matter. And when you take them consistently with the right kind of support, change does become possible. That's what this 12-week program is all about, creating a series of small guided resets that move you from, just getting through your day to actually feeling more like yourself again. And, best thing is you don't have to do it alone. The support and structure are here when you're ready. So your work matters, but so do you. So what you've learned today is we've talked about burnout and how it equals an incomplete stress cycle. We've talked about the hidden traps of burnout and 3 simple micro boundaries that help you protect your energy. So, burnout isn't just about stress, it's about all the ways we get stuck in expectations, isolation, and overfunctioning. Today we unpacked why women in STEM are especially vulnerable and how even small boundary shifts can help free your time, your energy, and your nervous system. You tried a creative reset. You felt what 5 minutes of space of reflection could do. And, you have an option to keep going with it because, as I said, your work does matter, but so do you. And, recovery isn't a luxury. It's a human right. It's yours. So I want to thank you for taking the time to actually be here, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. It takes effort to show up for something like this, especially when you're stretched super thin. And yeah, I just want to take a moment to honor that time that you've spent with me. And if there's one message I hope you're leaving with, it's this, you're not broken. You're not failing. You're just burned out. And there's a way through that. The small shifts you made today, whether it's taking a deep breath, drawing a line on the page, taking a moment to reflect, all of those things matter. They're not trivial. They are powerful because they're intentional. And definitely, if you're ready, I'd love for you to join the program with me and take it a little bit further. But even if all you do today is just carry away one insight forward from today, that's enough. It's something that I hope you'll take with you. And, please remember this. You don't have to do more to be worthy of rest. You already are. Take care of yourself. Reach out to me if you have questions. And yeah, just keep making space for time to breathe, for yourself to reset. These small daily shifts add up to major results. And yeah, thank you for joining me.